Initially, it started with my grandmother. She decided to immigrate, especially during the handover of Hong Kong back to China. So a lot of my family members, were working a lot of, I guess, government jobs or like things, and they weren't sure how that handover was going to go, just because a lot of them actually escaped during the war from mainland China down to Hong Kong or Macau. So my grandmother was actually the first one here, and then when my grandmother was here, she decided to bring the rest of her family, so that included my dad. They actually stopped in Florida first. They really didn't like it in Florida, so they ended up here in Hawaii. As working immigrants, like first generation immigrants, like they didn't really have much time off, and they didn't really have time to take care of me either. Like they had to make the sacrifice, like, do I stay at home and take care of me, or do I work? And so she ended up asking my grandmother to quit her job, and she took care of me full-time so that both my parents could work. So when I was younger, there was actually a lot of medical issues with my family. So there were a lot of things that needed to be translated. I think as a kid, like, I don't think I knew how to process those emotions just yet, but I think like the physicians that we were working with, like, they were very compassionate, and I think that really inspired me to kind of, follow in their footsteps, because they really took the time to at least try to, explain everything. And then when I got diagnosed with diabetes myself, I think that really confirmed my passion for medicine, because I knew as a young age, like looking at my family and knowing what they were going through, I was very cognizant of my own health. So when I was at Mauna Lua, the career counselor was probably my best mentor. She kind of knew that I had goals of wanting to go to medical school someday, and a lot of my friends like had dreams of going away for college. For me, I didn't know if that was possible, just because like my parents didn't have the income to be able to support that if it wasn't for scholarships, and she really pushed me to give those a shot. So coming back home during that time, my dad also was having some health complications. So because of that, that brought me home, and fortunately it was right before COVID. So his body like wouldn't even warm him anymore when he was going into hypoglycemia. My grandmother at the time was getting a lot older and needed a lot more assistance. She was having memory gaps and things like that, and they definitely needed someone to be home to like start taking care of her. I felt like for me, it was kind of, life kind of took its turns, and that I had to take care of my family, and they definitely came first. And like, even though if I made it in, I would still be taking care of all these things that are happening, and I don't think it would have been the right time for me to start medical school. So JABSOM has always been the goal. I've always wanted to practice here as a physician, and I think that JABSOM itself just really focuses on the person itself and like really tries to understand the patients as a whole. And I think that is something that is very different that I've noticed. A lot of the staff at JABSOM really like tries to make sure that you also focus on yourself as a student. And I've always wanted to go to a school where, giving back to the community is very important. And for me, that community is here. So I've always knew that JABSOM was where I wanted to be. Obviously academically it was very rigorous, and they had very high standards set for us, and I feel like everyone who gets into the program has the capability to succeed. But I think in addition to that, just the academic rigor, you also had to be very resilient, just because there's a lot of things outside of just academics that takes into a role in being in the program. In addition, for my path specifically, my grandmother unexpectedly passed during the process, and that was very difficult because I couldn't even go to her funeral. It was a sacrifice that I had to make because I knew that for me, she would want me to make it.
Anita Cheung, followed by mentor, Dr. Winona Lee.
You know, being able to like see a clear path for me, like, you know, getting in, they say, is always the hardest part. And once you're in, you're gonna go far. So, and like just everything like that I've been able to do as a medical student, you know, research, shadowing, and like, you know, already like help out in the community, like working at the mobile clinics with Home Project and like at vaccination clinics. I think that like really, you know, remotivates me to, you know, actually see myself like as a physician, while in the past it was always been like when this happens or like when I get into medical school. And I think now as like a medical student, like not just the learning, it's like everything that I always was curious about, you know, about our health and like, you know, a lot of the social things, but also being able to actually like, you know, give back to the community itself. I think that has always been what makes med school fun for me.
I'm very proud of her because he want to be a doctor. She want to be a doctor, right? That's why what I expect. Because for my family, she is the first one in several generations. She is the first one can be a doctor.
喺度幫我哋好多，因為我哋又唔識英文。我先生身體唔忙。有 Anita 喺度佢幫到個 family， 我就專心返工。得啦，講啦。Very happy, very proud of Anita。我哋就等於你達成咗個咩嘛？佢好細個就想做個 doctor， 而家佢成功過，我覺得我好驕傲，好開心。